OCALI, inspiring change for people with disabilities. Ask Abbey and Friends, word recognition and toolkit for deaf and hard of hearing learners. We're going to be focusing on fingerspelling and handshapes. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on OCALI's website for educational purposes. And you guys may have noticed that we've changed the title a little bit. So the Ask Abbey and Friends, I want you to save the date for March 9th if you're interested in learning more about visual phonics, and also cued speech on March 16th. And also, as always, if you know of a topic or a presenter that you would like to see in our learning community, please send that our way. And you can include that information in your response survey answers for today's workshop. Please let us know and we'll kind of consider that going forward. So today, our objectives, real quick, we're going to define the terms fingerspelling and handshapes as they relate to American Sign Language. We're going to list 3 ways that fingerspelling and or handshape instruction can be used to build phonological awareness for deaf and hard of hearing students. Small skills, but they pay big dividends. As you'll notice on the screen, we have a picture of a small gatehouse that's leading to a bigger house on the bridge. All right, so what is fingerspelling and finger reading? Many of us who have maybe took an American Sign Language class in high school or college are familiar with fingerspelling, and that's when you're using your hand in the manual alphabet, which is 26 hand shapes, to spell a word. All right, so if I go C-A-T, I just spelled cat. That's me fingerspelling. Many of us have not thought about the other side, which is when you're taking it in and you're watching someone else spell C-A-T, fingerspell cat, and you have to take that in and then have that aha, I received the message. I also want to take this time to remind you that I'm going to be talking about American Sign Language, and that manual alphabet has 26 hand shapes. It's not universal and it's not two-handed. If you're talking about another sign language, that may be a two-handed alphabet. Today, we're just talking about American Sign Language hand shapes. Fingerspelling as a connection. So I have a chart on the page, fingerspelling as a connection to print. You start at the top box, which is the mental lexicon, sign, lexicalized fingerspelling in the spoken word. You're going to go down to the next box, fingerspelling, the physical fingerspelling and the word analysis, and then the mental fingerspelling and the phonological representation. The last box on the left says mental orthographic representation, and that kind of carries over into orthographic knowledge and sublexical knowledge and word identification. So when I spell something or I see it and I think about it, now I have access to that word or that meaning. Fingerspelling is another bridge to literacy. It provides a direct correlation, a one-to-one correspondence with the printed word in English, whether I'm reading or writing. So again, if I go back to cat, that C-A-T, I'm going to be able to write that on a page or read it. Now, fingerspelling does not give you a direct path to each sound or rule for the written word. I've never liked the word phone. Pet peeve. So phone, I know that's going to be P-H-O-N-E. But I have to know that PH will make the F sound. But if I'm fingerspelling it, it's going to be P-H-O-N-E. I'm just straight spelling it. And then I'm also going to have to know that's kind of a silent E, because when I look at that word, I think it's Mahoney. But remember that save the date that I was talking about? That's going to give you additional tools on how do I build those bridges to access that word or those different avenues of the word when you unpack it. The direct link to English print on the left, you'll see a graphic. The top circle says ASL signs. Then the second circle says English print, and then the bottom circle says fingerspelling forms. So the ASL sign for cat, whiskers on my cheek, that kind of gives you a semantic connection, but limited alphabetic connection. I can't connect this sign for cat to C-A-T. There's no direct bridge. But when I fingerspell cat, I can connect that to the English print. So if you look on the right, you have the ASL signs, fingerspelling forms. They're stacked on top of each other. I'm emphasizing both. And now I have 2 quick pathways to the English print. And they're going to provide me slightly different information. But I get that aha moment, cat or cat, but I'm connecting it back to the printed word for reading or writing. I love this document. You're going to see it often, but this PDF, the importance of fingerspelling for reading. If you look at the lower left-hand corner, there's a hyperlink where you can go watch a short YouTube clip about it. But I want to emphasize, start early with the fingerspelling, the input. when you're a little one and you're watching and you're taking it in, you're building those pathways. Finger babbling starts in response to conversation with a lot of input. So now you're going to start having that output around 8 to 12 months if you're in a signing rich environment. Perceives fingerspelled words as a whole unit known as a movement envelope. So I'm going to start seeing cat versus caterpillar. I'm going to catch that around 12 to 24 months. Later on, I'm going to get to lexicalized signs at 36 to 48 months for bus or TV. I've had conversations within my own community. Abby, you're crazy. Why are you starting fingerspelling? They just got to preschool. Start right away. It's a part of the language, and it gives you an avenue to literacy skills as well. You're not going to withhold that till kindergarten, first grade. I've also had to go back with middle schoolers that weren't fluently finger reading or finger spelling. I've had deaf and hard of hearing middle schoolers that didn't have that foundational skill and had to go back. The impact of fingerspelling on phonological awareness. Many of us, when we were taught or thought about phonological awareness, we only did it from the ear perspective. So here I've got a diagram. You've got the first level of representation, spoken language. I voice and say cat, spoken English phonemes. I sign cat, and you've got the ASL signs and the 5 parameters that you're going to look at when you're tearing apart a sign or a word. The second level is different English graphings. I'm going to see that on the page. The third level is the fingerspelled alphabet, cat. That manual alphabet to graphing correspondence is really important. So now I've got 2 different pathways to unpack that written word. It's going to trigger different representations in my brain. And this one may get it for me, and this one may get it for me. Fingerspelling and phonological awareness. The fingerspelling can support the development of the following skills: initial letters, pattern recognition within words, prefixes and suffixes, word length and shape, that movement envelope we were talking about, noticing cat versus caterpillar, compound words, onset, rhymes, and alliteration, syllables, and word and letter manipulation. This can be done at all ages. As I mentioned, my little one that just showed up at preschool, and even my middle schoolers, we've gone back and we've looked at words such as triangle or quadrilateral. If you're fingerspelling, they're going to notice that tri or that quad. The role of fingerspelling and ASL standards, you've got 2 different sets of standards here, and I would encourage you to go look at both of them. They come from different perspectives. One is looking at native signers, and the other is where sign language is your secondary language. In the standards, you'll see later on that they specifically focus on fingerspelling and finger reading. But as a teacher, I find it helpful to go, all right, I've got my English language arts standards, and I've got my American Sign Language standards. At the bottom of the screen on the left corner, you'll see fingerspelling and finger reading standards. There's several different little boxes that you can look at where they break the ASL standards into different strands, much like you would see with your English language arts standards. On the right, I've got different hyperlinks that you can click on, such as a short clip on what is finger reading, what is fingerspelling, or what are classifiers. Because classifiers don't exist in English, so that's kind of a mind bender for a lot of people when you're explaining that. Fingerspelling is also across the curriculum. It's not just during English language arts and reading and writing. I love this little graphic on the left. You can see where they say, let's learn numbers 0 through 10, the number line. You're counting 3 black dots. You're assigning the number 3. Then you're fingerspelling the number 3. You're reading the word 3. You're writing it, and then you're drawing. So you're having many different points of contact with that concept of 3. So I would encourage that you go look at the BL2 resources because they have them on both ASL numbers and the alphabet. Fingerspelling tidbits. Many of us may not realize this. Native ASL users will fingerspell around 10 to 15% of the time during signed discourse. However, deaf teachers, educators, use over 50% more fingerspelled words than hearing teachers. And that's that natural chain and use of the language that is being stressed. Some of us may have a phobia of fingerspelling, and I'm going to try to say this, lectidactyl phobia, impacting the use and exposure of fingerspelling and finger reading. Many of us kind of feel like a deer in headlight when someone spells at us, and we're like, oh my gosh, I got to get my brain to process that. Or I'm going to avoid fingerspelling that because they're too young. I'm going to just use a sign, when you really, in some cases, should use both the sign and the fingerspelling. All right, so it's a summary. Start right away. Do not delay. I've had people say, Abby, I don't know, this kid is in preschool. Start fingerspelling even at the preschool level and before. Fingerspelling and finger reading are an important aspect of American Sign Language. And I noticed I mentioned all content areas, all environments. You can do this in the home with your family or with a sibling or when you're at Walmart and environmental print. It goes everywhere. Deaf children of deaf parents can begin to sign as early as 8 months. That's that early input we were talking about. Early attempts at fingerspelling appear around 13 months of age, with the first fingerspelled word appearing around 2 years of age. So that's mind-blowing. And fingerspelling and finger reading can be a direct link to the written word. All right, so hand shapes in American Sign Language. So we're going to kind of leave the manual alphabet and those 26 hand shapes behind, and we're going to look at one of the 5 parameters of American Sign Language. So we're focusing on hand shapes. If you don't know the others, check back in with us later. But the ASL hand shapes that we're going to be talking about, there's approximately 50 hand shapes that you could focus on. But we're teaching the pattern in one language. So if I can break apart the sign or this word and put it back together, that's going to wire my brain to catch that in other avenues, such as written English, when I'm reading and writing, if I'm listening, if I'm speaking, if I can do it in a concrete hands-on way, I'm going to be able to transfer that skill to other avenues. Handshape development. So I've got a diagram, pictures here of stage 1 hand shapes all the way down to stage 4. So a more simplistic hand shape is going to be L hand shape or the B hand shape, but we're not using it as the manual alphabet. So kind of keep in mind those classifiers I mentioned briefly, or the more complex X hand shape or R hand shape. I'm not using it as the letter, but I'm going to use it in a way when I'm signing for different aspects. And again, the same diagram here in case you needed to see it in a different way, such as basic hand shapes evolve into more complex hand shapes. You'll see a new signer or a young person starting with the easier hand shapes and then going on to other hand shapes that are more complicated from a fine motor perspective. Again, hand shape standards. So we have the fingerspell and finger reading standards. Now we have hand shape standards. So students are going to present information and concepts and ideas to an audience of viewers in American Sign Language. This may be rhymes or short anecdotes or poems using hand shapes. For the 8th grade standards, students analyze and compare the meaning of selected classifiers. And classifiers will help identify size and shape specifiers, comparing animals and people. It's part of a rich language. So if you're missing that part, you're going to find it much harder to be descriptive in your communication. Hand shape instruction. So having specific hand shape standards and instruction, specialized instruction, can help support the development of the following skills: rhyming, word sign manipulation, storytelling, categorization, language development. So if I were to ask you to think of the signs for paper, college, nice, and I don't want to sign it right away, so I want you guys to think about what was in common with those signs. And during the lifetime, we'll talk about that as well, and I can show you. But think about what was similar and what was different. So as I mentioned here, hand shape activities, the hand twisters, tongue twisters, hand shape stories and poems, linguistic analysis, hand shape tracing, classroom posters, a hand shape word wall. So you're accessing the words by the hand shape, such as maybe using this one. So I'm looking at teacher. So because right now I don't have a link to, well, teacher, but how do I go from this hand shape to the letter T? So you're going to access that word wall slightly differently. And card games. On the right, you'll see a classroom photo that I borrowed from a friend. And you'll see ASL movement, and graphing, and location, and a little cartoon character person on the blue background. Fine motor issues and considerations. If it is popping up and it's not something that is age appropriate, you know, a 3-year-old versus a 12-year-old kind of thing, work with your school, community, occupational therapist, physical therapist, or even a vision specialist. Are you having trouble seeing the difference between the hand shapes? And if it is a fine motor issue, accept production variations as long as they're consistent use. I had a student whose bones were actually fused. So her R was kind of like this versus the standard R. That's fine. That was her version of R. So we want to respect those differences in each learner. You're also going to want to work with the SLP or American Sign Language specialist, again, to look at how they're accessing the language receptively versus expressively. So you may have someone that's going to use the language primarily receptively, and they may use additional communication approaches expressively, and that's okay. On the right, there's a resource that talks about the impact of motor skills on sign articulation, which is kind of a new thing that you're seeing in the field, that being addressed, which is nice. Additional resources from our center. These are previous Ask Abbeys or other webinars that we've had that we want to kind of direct you to if you have more information on how we can connect to literacy for our deaf and hard of hearing students. And these are various resources that we used or accessed while we were making today's webinar. Thank you. And thank you for visiting us, and go to www.ocali.org.